In the marketplace of ancient Athens, where voices collided and philosophies clashed, Plato stood as one of the rare thinkers who dared to look beyond appearances. His warning about democracy was not a condemnation of collective decision-making, but a lamentation for a society that worships freedom without understanding and equality without virtue. What he foresaw was not a distant nightmare. It is the reality we are now sleepwalking into. For Plato, democracy was not an ultimate good. It was, rather, a stage in a dangerous political cycle, a transition that, if not guided by wisdom, would inevitably decay into tyranny. And that decay would not begin with violence but with comfort, with the seductive voice of freedom that tells everyone they are wise simply because they are free. But freedom without direction becomes chaos, and from that chaos emerges the tyrant. Plato's most profound insights come through the character of Socrates in his dialogues, especially in the Republic. In this work, Plato paints a picture of the soul of a democracy, lively, colorful, filled with choices. But underneath the joy of unbounded liberty lies a poison, the rejection of authority, the disdain for discipline, and the elevation of desires as rights. In such a state, every person becomes their own ruler. No one listens to the old or the wise. Traditions are mocked, and every limit is seen as an enemy of freedom. The schoolboy sees himself as equal to his teacher, the citizen as equal to the statesman, the unwise as equal to the philosopher. At first glance, it feels like progress, but in Plato's eyes, it is the beginning of collapse. Because when every voice is equal, truth loses its weight. The crowd, drawn by passion rather than reason, is easily swayed by charming liars. Those who seek power need not be good. They only need to be entertaining. They tell the people what they want to hear, that they are victims, that they are powerful, that the enemies are everywhere except within. Plato observed that in such a democracy, the worst souls rise, the courageous become reckless, the disciplined are seen as cold and controlling, the greedy are celebrated for their ambition, and in the absence of order, people grow afraid, not of rulers but of their neighbors. Suspicion grows, tensions rise. Everyone is free, and no one is safe. In time, the people, exhausted by chaos, begin to long for structure. They want a leader, someone strong, someone who promises peace, order, prosperity. This is when the tyrant steps forward. He is not born with chains in his hands. He is born with promises on his lips. He tells the people that he will protect them, that he will punish the corrupt, that he will bring justice. But his justice is not guided by virtue. It is shaped by vengeance. He purges the elite, silences dissenters, rewrites laws. And the people, still dazed by their freedom, cheer him on. Plato describes this tyrant as the ultimate slave to his own appetites. But to the people, he looks like a god. He rewards loyalty and crushes opposition. The society that once rejected authority now kneels before absolute control. And this, according to Plato, is the fate of a democracy without wisdom. What is this wisdom? It is not knowledge of facts. It is the discipline of the soul, the understanding of justice, of truth, of the limits of desire. It is the humility to listen, the strength to restrain, and the courage to seek what is right, even when it is unpopular. Plato's city, the Callipolis, was to be ruled by philosopher kings, those who had ascended beyond illusions and could see the forms, especially the form of the good. To modern ears, this might sound elitist. But Plato wasn't suggesting a dictatorship of intellectuals. He was urging for leadership shaped by inner clarity, by virtue, by deep understanding. Because only those who know themselves can lead others without exploiting them. Today, democracy is once again celebrated without question. But have we asked whether we are wise enough to bear its weight? Do we understand freedom? Or are we using it as a mask to hide from responsibility? We must remember, democracy is not self-sustaining. It is fragile, dependent on the soul of its citizens. If we abandon wisdom, we are not walking toward progress. We are marching toward chains. Plato's voice echoes across millennia, not as an enemy of freedom, but as its most serious guardian. He challenges us to look within, to examine our desires, to resist the seduction of easy answers. And above all, he reminds us, when wisdom is lost, freedom is not far behind. The question is not whether history is repeating itself. The question is, are we willing to see it before it's too late? The descent into slavery in Plato's view is not abrupt. It is subtle, gradual, and often disguised as progress. He believed that when democracy is not guided by wisdom, it opens the door to tyranny. This insight is not just a critique of governance. It is a psychological and spiritual diagnosis of society. In a democratic society where everyone believes they are free to do as they please, boundaries blur. People begin to think that their opinions carry equal weight, regardless of experience, knowledge, or wisdom. The teacher and the student, the doctor and the patient, the parent and the child, all are seen as equals in authority. While this may sound like freedom, Plato saw danger. He believed that such a state leads to chaos because decisions are no longer grounded in truth or virtue, but in personal desires and whims. This chaotic freedom, where each man becomes a law unto himself, creates instability. And from this instability, the people begin to crave order. They no longer want the burdens of decision-making. They no longer want the responsibility that comes with freedom. And so, they reach out for a savior. This is how the tyrant is born. The tyrant doesn't rise by force at first. He appears as a protector, a man of the people, someone who promises to restore balance and justice. He speaks the language of the masses. He promises to protect them from their enemies, both real and imagined. He flatters their desires, legitimizes their anger, and masks his ambition behind the cloak of concern. Plato describes this moment as the death of true democracy and the birth of slavery. We see this pattern again and again in history. Society intoxicated by its own freedom becomes vulnerable. Its people, in their desperation, willingly hand over their liberties to a single man who promises safety. And once he has power, he does not relinquish it. The protector becomes the master. The people, once free, are now slaves, and they do not even realize how it happened. Plato's concern wasn't just with politics, but with the soul. Democracy without wisdom is like a soul without self-control. When desires rule over reason, when emotions override thought, when pleasure becomes the highest good, the soul becomes disordered, and a disordered soul cannot be free. It becomes a slave to its impulses, a victim of its own chaos. The same is true for societies. Without wisdom, the kind that comes from self-knowledge, discipline, and a love of truth, democracy becomes a playground for demagogues. Leaders reflect the souls of their people. A wise society produces wise leaders. A chaotic, pleasure-seeking society produces tyrants. Plato challenges us to look inward. He reminds us that political structures are mirrors of the soul. If we wish to preserve freedom, we must first cultivate wisdom. That means questioning our desires. It means valuing truth over convenience. It means recognizing that not all opinions are equal and that freedom requires restraint. In his dialogue, The Republic, Plato doesn't just offer a political theory. He offers a path of inner transformation. The just society, he says, begins with the just soul. The soul where reason governs spirit and desire. The soul that seeks not only freedom, but the wisdom to use it well. When we neglect this inner work, when we chase pleasure and avoid pain, when we follow leaders who tell us what we want to hear instead of what we need to hear, we walk the road toward tyranny. Not because someone forces us, but because we invite it. We welcome it. We beg for it. This is what makes Plato's warning so urgent. The danger is not out there. It is within us. Tyranny begins in the heart that refuses to grow, that resents truth, and that fears responsibility. And democracy without the foundation of wisdom only hastens that descent. Look around today. We see a culture obsessed with self-expression, but allergic to self-reflection. We see debates where shouting replaces reasoning. We see freedom used not to elevate the soul, but to indulge it. Plato saw this and he knew where it leads. He wrote for us, not just for his time. History, as he said, repeats itself. And if we fail to learn, we will fall. Not because we were defeated by others, but because we failed ourselves. The question now is not what kind of government we want. The real question is, what kind of people are we becoming? Are we seeking truth, or are we just feeding our preferences? Are we building character, or are we just satisfying our appetites? Plato's call is clear. Let wisdom be our guide. Let the soul lead the way. Only then can democracy flourish. Only then can freedom be real. What happens when a society, under the illusion of freedom, forgets the responsibilities that true liberty demands? Plato offers us not only a warning, but a deep psychological analysis of the human soul when it is seduced by the promises of comfort over truth. He understood that when citizens neglect the pursuit of wisdom, democracy, once idealized as the rule of the people, begins to decay from within. And that decay doesn't just result in inefficiency or corruption, it can birth tyranny. In Book 8 of the Republic, Plato outlines a vivid picture of how different regimes evolve and collapse. He describes how a democracy, if unchecked, can devolve into tyranny. At first glance, this may seem paradoxical. Democracy, after all, is supposed to represent freedom, equality, and the voice of the people. But Plato peels back the layers of this system to reveal its hidden vulnerability, the erosion of reason in favor of appetite. When a society prioritizes individual desires above collective responsibility, chaos begins to seep into its foundations. Everyone demands their rights but avoids their duties. Discipline is seen as oppression, and moral values are labeled as outdated restrictions. The individual, no longer guided by wisdom, becomes guided by passions. In such a state, the loudest, not the wisest, gains power. And the loudest voice is often that of a demagogue. Plato's depiction of the democratic man is one driven by impulse, treating all desires equally, without hierarchy or reflection. He flits from one passion to another, like a leaf caught in the wind. This kind of life, while appearing free, is actually enslaved to fleeting cravings, and a society made up of such individuals is ripe for collapse. It opens the door for someone who promises order, someone who claims they can restore balance, but who in reality seeks control. The tyrant emerges not as a conqueror, but as a savior. He speaks the language the people want to hear. He tells them they are great, that their enemies are to blame, that all their problems will disappear if they give him just a little more power. Slowly, and often with public support, he dismantles the structures that once upheld freedom. What makes this transformation so insidious is that it feels like progress. The people, exhausted from chaos and confusion, welcome the firm hand. They trade liberty for stability, and in doing so, they become complicit in their own subjugation. Plato warns us, this is not just a political problem, it's a spiritual one. A society reflects the souls of its citizens. If the inner life is disordered, if people neglect self-examination and truth-seeking, the political world will mirror that disorder. Tyranny outside begins with tyranny inside, the domination of reason by desire. In our own time, we see echoes of this pattern. When social discourse is dominated by outrage rather than dialogue, when education is devalued, when critical thinking is replaced by tribal allegiance, we edge closer to the precipice, Plato described. His warning isn't locked in the past. It is alive, relevant, and urgent. The antidote, according to Plato, is not to abandon democracy, but to cultivate wisdom. A democracy guided by knowledge and virtue can thrive. It can empower individuals to rise above mere consumption and become active participants in the shaping of a just society. But this requires effort. It demands leaders who are philosophers, not in the academic sense, but in the deeper sense of being lovers of wisdom. and it requires citizens who are willing to ask hard questions, who refuse to be seduced by easy answers. People who understand that freedom is not the absence of restraint, but the ability to govern oneself according to truth. Plato never claimed that building such a society was easy, but he believed it was possible. The philosopher king may be an ideal, but the pursuit of that ideal can transform lives. The first step is to recognize the war that is being waged, not with weapons, but with ideas, not in the streets, but in the mind. If you want to prevent tyranny, start with your own soul. Discipline your desires, pursue wisdom, speak truth, even when it's unpopular. Choose leaders who reflect these values, not just your preferences, because in the end, the freedom of a society depends on the integrity of the individuals within it. This is the lesson Plato left us, not as a relic of a forgotten past, but as a beacon for those willing to see. When Plato gazed into the nature of democracy, he saw a paradox that few dared to acknowledge. On the surface, democracy seems the ultimate expression of human freedom, a system where every voice counts and all share in power. But Plato saw, beneath this surface, a dangerous vulnerability. When wisdom is not the guiding light, when the people are not educated in truth and virtue, democracy becomes fertile ground for chaos. And in that chaos, the seeds of tyranny find their nourishment. Plato did not speak against democracy because he disliked freedom. Quite the opposite. He believed in the liberation of the soul, in the pursuit of truth, and in the dignity of reason. But he warned that without philosophical grounding, without citizens who seek the good, and not merely their desires, democracy would collapse under the weight of its own confusion. For when every opinion is given equal weight, regardless of its connection to truth or justice, society loses its compass. In his great work, The Republic, Plato tells us of the ship of state, a powerful metaphor. Imagine a ship where the crew fights for control, each claiming they know the course, while the true navigator, the one who studied the stars and understands the sea, is dismissed as useless. This is Plato's warning. When societies ignore those who seek wisdom and elevate those who appeal to passions, the ship drifts toward disaster. And who takes control when disaster strikes? The tyrant. The tyrant arises not from strength, but from desperation. He promises order when there is confusion, safety when there is fear, and identity when there is division. The people, exhausted by noise and contradiction, accept the strong hand. They do not see that they have traded liberty for comfort, self-governance for subjugation. And so, as Plato warned, democracy without wisdom ends not in enlightenment, but in enslavement. What makes this warning even more urgent is its cyclical nature. History does not march forward in a straight line. It turns, bends, and returns. Each generation must face the same temptations: to chase pleasure over principle, to silence dissent in the name of unity, to reject complexity for the ease of slogans. Plato's message is not just historical, it is deeply human. He invites us not to abandon democracy, but to redeem it. True democracy, in Plato's vision, must be more than procedure. It must be a culture of truth. Citizens must be educated not only in facts, but in virtue. They must learn to govern their own souls before they can govern a city. Without inner harmony, the outer systems collapse, and where there is no justice in the soul, justice in society becomes impossible. Plato calls us to become philosopher citizens, not detached thinkers but active participants guided by wisdom. He urges us to question the loudest voices, to resist the easy answers, and to seek leaders who serve, not dominate. The ideal leader in Plato's thought is not the one who desires power, but the one who has mastered the self and has no hunger for control. Look around the world today. Listen to the cries of frustration, the disillusionment with politics, the hunger for meaning. Plato's voice echoes across time, asking, have we built our systems on wisdom or merely on opinion? Do we educate our children to be free thinkers or compliant consumers? Are we cultivating minds that ask hard questions, or merely feeding the cycle of noise? The erosion of wisdom is not loud, it is subtle. It happens when entertainment replaces education, when convenience replaces truth, when comfort silences courage. A democracy without wise citizens is like a body without a spine. It cannot stand, but there is hope. Plato never abandoned hope. Even as he criticized the politics of his time, he believed in the power of transformation. He believed that through philosophy, through dialogue, through inner awakening, human beings could rise. Not all at once, not easily, but truly. His allegory of the cave is not a story of condemnation. It is a story of liberation. Yes, people are often trapped in illusion. Yes, they resist those who bring light, but some will break free. Some will ascend, and those few can become beacons, guiding others toward the real. You may be one of them. Plato's warning is not just for leaders, but for every soul who seeks to live rightly. Do not let democracy become a theater of empty promises. Let it become a garden where truth is cultivated, where voices rise in harmony with reason, where freedom is not a mask for desire, but a path to the good. History is repeating itself, but you are not powerless. Wisdom is still possible. The soul can still awaken, justice can still be reborn. This is Plato's final gift, a mirror. In it, we see the errors of our world and the possibility of its renewal, not through force, not through fear, but through the courageous pursuit of truth, within ourselves and in our societies. If these words resonated with you, if you feel the stirring of something deeper, don't keep it to yourself. Share this message. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that awaken and empower. And together, let's build not just a better world, but better souls to live in it.